Are you terrified about what might happen to your career as a data engineer over the next 6 to 18 months? Well, tonight we're going to talk to you about how to future proof your career so that you can stay relevant and ahead of the curve as a data engineer. As we talk to Shane Gibson tonight, we're going to talk about things like T skills and how to develop a deep understanding of different specific career sets that will set you apart as a data engineer. Let's jump
But the
in.
thing is, I'm going to talk a lot about patterns because that's just how I think and talk these days. But if we think about the last 3 decades, a lot of things have changed, but a lot of things haven't. There's now this whole wave of BI semantic layer conversations and the idea of context layers for AI tools.
Yeah.
Back in the disco days, with Discovery, we had an end user layer. We had business objects with their universe. We had a BI centric semantic layer to do a whole lot of heavy lifting. And so we go through these waves of have it, lose it, have it, lose it. And one of the things I want to talk about today is while our technology is constantly changing, we go back and forward. We tend to spend most of our time focusing on that and not focusing on the patterns that we use in the data craft, the way we work as a team, as a bunch of individuals. We just focus on the technology changes all the time and the latest cool. And for me, teams that have been really successful are the ones that focus on the way they work as much as they focus on the technologies they use.
And kind of going into like that concept of patterns and the way we work, you and I talked about the other day this concept of T skills and really what it means as a data engineer to kind of build out your own skill set and both broad in breadth as well as depth. And I think that was one of the things that you wanted to get into tonight as well.
Yeah, because I think it's important, if we talk about the last 3 decades, to say some things have changed. Back a while ago, we had, a couple of waves ago, we had lots of disparate tools. It wasn't called data engineering back there or analytics engineering. It was called an ETL developer or data warehouse developer. But those roles were quite specific. You got given a set of requirements and you built that piece, and you're working in a team typically where somebody did the bit before you and somebody did the bit after you. So BA will go and get requirements, data modeler would do the model design, somebody would do quite high quality specs, somebody else would maintain the tools, you would actually do the ETL piece. And then somebody else would do the viz, right? They come in with Disco or business objects of Cognos. And so you kind of sat in this box, and you bled out a little bit to the other skills, but you were kind of safe in your box. And lots of people loved that, right? They were really good at what they did. They were experts. They were like master chefs. And then the market kind of changed. And we've seen that in other domains. So we've seen, full stack developers coming out of software engineering. We've seen data scientists be called unicorns, right? Where supposedly they're end to end. And in the latest wave, we went through the modern data stack again, where we started to specialize a little bit. But the latest wave, especially with the advent of AI with the air quotes, we're going to see the need for that specialization to change. Now it may, I'm not going to say it's going to disappear, but I'm going to say it's going to change. And so in the data engineering space, my belief to keep adding the value that data engineers provide is we need to broaden our skills. Now, it doesn't mean we need to be the masters of nothing, good at everything, masters of nothing. But what it means is we actually have to extend our skills out. And I use this idea of T skills, which came out of the agile domain, I think, to kind of describe to engineers how I think they should change the way they work, but not what they do, if that makes sense. Yeah, and we've seen these waves, right? So these waves, every 7 to 9 years, we go through the wave of centralization and decentralization of tools. And so we were about to enter the wave where we move from decentralization in the modern data stack, 10 to 20 different bits of technology that were fit for purpose, best of breed, and we cobbled them together. And we were moving back to the centralization. There's a couple of things that causing that. A lot of the startups that got funding back when money was free, money became tight, so they were naturally running out of runway and were going to be acqui-hired or go under. The big boys, the Databricks and the Snowflakes wanted to become ecosystems, end-to-end platforms, which is what naturally happens. Think Oracle, IBM, Microsoft back in the old days.
Yep.
So they naturally start bringing in and buying those capabilities or building themselves to go end-to-end. So we get this natural centralization, decentralization behavior in our data domain every 7 to 10 years. But this time's slightly different because with the Gen AI and the LLMs, we're seeing this disruption in the time it takes for those waves to happen. And as data engineers, it's my belief we have a choice. We can get even more deep into the skill we have, because what we're going to see is 80 to 95% of the engineering work is going to be treated as commodity. And 5% of it will be organizations or the work that requires craft, that requires expert coaching level. People in the middle going to have a bit of a challenge, is my view. And so we have a choice. We either become those expert coaches in our core skill, or we go for a breadth of skills. And that's where the idea of T skills comes from. So if we think about a diagram, and across the top, we have a set of skills. And in my view, in the data domain, we have skills around stakeholder engagement, facilitation, requirements gathering, architecture, data modeling, development, testing or QA, documentation, and releasing, management of the release in the platform. So think about those across the top. And then down, we have the depth. So we have this idea of a novice. I've never really done it before. I want to learn it. Practitioner. I use it every day. Adept. I use it every day. And if I have a problem that's slightly different, I can probably work it out myself. Expert. I'm the one in the room on the Zoom that everybody comes to when they have that problem. And then we have this thing called a jump to a coach. And the reason that's different is to go from an expert to a coach, you need to be able to teach somebody else to do it like you do. So rather than do the work, you have to explain and mentor the work. And that's actually quite a hard jump. So skills across the top, depth down the side, and then we figure out what we're good at. So if we're really good at development, if you think about it, development's in the middle of the skills, we get this idea of a T, because that's our strength. And then we have these other skills that we often see. So often developers or engineers are good at testing. They're good at QA. They're good at modeling. They're kind of good at documentation if they have to be, pretty much good at release. But if I look at somebody that's really good at facilitation, like a role that used to be called business analysis or a data analyst, they tend to be on the left, right? They tend to be more of, a portion of an F, because they're good at stakeholder management. They're good at facilitation. They're good at eliciting requirements and demands and needs. They might be good at documentation. Funnily enough, they always tend to like to do those two. So we get these shapes of skills. And right now, my view is people need to choose what they want to do next, because change is an opportunity. It's a risk, but it's also an opportunity. So what do you want to do? Do you want to increase the depth of your skills, or do you want to increase the breadth of your skills? That's the choice you have to make today, I believe.
So that was just a small segment of what Shane and I covered on Friday night. We got into so much about how to future-proof your career and just some history about data engineering, where it came from, where it's been, and where we believe that it's going. So if you want to check out the full thing, it is about an hour and a half long, so just to prepare you. But feel free to come and go as you please and take a look at that episode right here.